if you want to start us
We
off,
ready?
that would be great.
Good. All right, welcome to those online, which I think is everybody. Today is Thursday, October 17th, 2024. This is the quarterly meeting of the Wasatch Front Economic Development District Committee. I'm Commissioner Gage Ford. I'll be conducting. Marcia White is with us at the WFRC offices. Again, welcome for those online. Before we start our agenda, I'm going to ask Andrea to take a roll call and identify those people we have online. Andrea, would you please do that?
Certainly, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Okay, so online today we have Commissioner Gage Ford, Meg Padgen, Mayor Debbie Wynn, Mayor Dave Vaughn, Catherine Lowe, Gwen Curvin, Matt Ryan, John Downen, Chris Sloan, Marion Florence, Mike Moore, Mayor Karen Lang, Rosie Hernandez, Marsha White, Alex Lenardi, Ginger Chin, Byron Head, Stephen Smith, Madison Aviles, Shannon Ellsworth, Che Mosqueda, Sarah Tolliver, and there are a couple of AI initials that I'm unable to tell who you are. So if you want to change your name, and then we'll read you into the role a little bit later. That's everybody, Commissioner. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrea. So, Marcia, I'm assuming nobody else is live with you.
No, we have someone here that wants to give, I think, public comment, but no. And it looks like some
Okay.
others have joined. I think a few others have joined. So if we didn't call out your name, please put it in the chat so that we can get it recorded for our meeting today.
Yeah, if anybody just joined us, didn't have their name called, if you'd please do that so we have public record, that would be great. So good. I appreciate the attendance. Looks like we have a good group online with us this afternoon. Let's go to Chair's report, which will review the bylaws and the WFE District Development District Financial Report. As everybody's aware, the Wasatch Front Economic Development District is under the umbrella organization of the Wasatch Front Regional Council and is governed by the interlocal agreement and bylaws enacted in 2014. Marcia White, who's with us, and the team at WFRC, they've reviewed the interlocal agreements, bylaws, and the EDA regulations to ensure that the WFE is still in compliant with all three. So Marcia is going to take just a few minutes to give us an overview of those findings and let us know where we stand. Marcia, go ahead.
Let me get my screen up here. It's coming. Maybe.
Looks like it's trying to.
Rosie, maybe can you pull it up, or Jordan, maybe? I don't know if maybe it's my internet that's not playing very nice.
There you go.
There it is. So as directed by the board committee, gosh, about 3 or 4 meetings ago, you asked me to do a quick review of our interlocal agreements and bylaws. And what I did is I wanted to make sure that we were all rowing in the same direction. As you know, we are regulated by the Economic Development Administration. So we have to follow their rules and regulations. We also have an interlocal agreement between Wasatch Front Regional Council and the Wasatch Front Economic Development District. So we are actually, WFEDD is under the umbrella of the Wasatch Front Regional Council. So we wanted to make sure that we were following the interlocal agreements, as well as making sure that we also have to follow the bylaws that have been established. So I took some time and looked at, as you can see, the EDA updated their regulations in 2020. And I just wanted to make sure that we were following those regulations and requirements. And there was one area that I thought we really wanted to point out. The EDA has what they consider who should be on in a development district or on the committee or board. They call it a may, and so it may include private sector, public officials, community leaders, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to read all of those. So I wanted to make sure that we were following those mays from the EDA. And lo and behold, whoever put this together in 2014 were pretty darn smart. So we looked at, on the left-hand side, we have an interlocal membership, which we have to follow the rules of 51% of elected and or general purpose unit of government appointed needs to be represented, and then no less than 35% of non-governmental members. So we went through 5 members, and their alternates are elected or appointed from the different COGs, 1 member in their alternative as a representative of government, 5 members and their alternates of non-government reps. So we outlined for-profit chambers, post-secondary workforce and union labor in our interlocal agreement. And then we have a section for other members and then strategy members. And so I thought that it would be, wanted to make sure that we were following the EDA maze, and we were able to do so without changing the interlocal agreement or the bylaws by still doing the 5 members from the COGs, 5 other member representatives that's already outlined. And my suggestion is to put all 5 county economic development reps in that category. We already invite them, but I think that it would be as an official membership. 1 representative from government, and then the 5 non-government reps. So we added a minority interest. The other is 3 other members. I think it's really important because of the area that we're in, especially with what we have in front of us with the Olympics, that we include tourism, public safety, or military, since we have quite a few military areas in our region, and then also healthcare because it plays such an important role. Still keeping the strategy members and then other invitees, and I would like to add several other invitees, whether that's from the other 6 AOGs and or other economic development, maybe city members or those. So that's what would be in the other members. So really very modest member modifications, but it still fits into that interlocal membership. Basically, we don't have to change either the interlocal or the bylaws is what that comes down to. Out
Right.
of all of that, I was surprised that it was, we didn't have to change it very much. The other thing that I'm going to do in the next few months is to create an internal standard operating procedures, just making sure that as we go forward in the future, that we will be able to continue to have the same membership, the number of meetings that we need to do in a year and those kind of things. So I'm just making sure that we internally know what we need to do and what those bylaws and interlocal agreement says about our committee. Any questions for me?
Great. Any questions for Marcia on her presentation?
Mr. Chair, can I briefly?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Thanks. Just had a comment. First of all, hello, everybody. Nice to see you. Thanks for the pivot on the virtual meeting today. Marcia, thanks for going over this. Just to briefly reinforce what Marcia's saying here. It's a good practice, we think, to make sure periodically that we're in full compliance with all the applicable rules for any of our entities. So thanks to Marcia and Marion and Meg for working with her to make sure we're in full compliance, which we are. More substantively important, is, as Marcia's describing, making sure that the Economic Development District has this breadth of representation from all of you around the region, bringing people together to help chart the course for what kind of region we want and what kind of economy and economic opportunities we want. And so, as you see here, and those of you who all know each other, having a breadth of people who are involved in charting that course is really valuable. So that's the most important thing. There's no action here. It's an update to you. But then this, if there's any, as Marcia said, if there's any comments or questions or suggestions, we would welcome them. And then that would help inform, as we get into the beginning of next calendar year, the process of reaffirming membership and then also reaching out potentially to some additional folks to be part of these discussions. So no action, but welcome feedback as we look ahead to membership in this group next year.
Yeah, great point, Andrew. So obviously no actions needed. Appreciate the review. Looks like we're in full compliance with all the organizations we need to be in compliance with them. And I also would say, yeah, if anybody has suggestions or recommendations as we get into 2025 for maybe additional membership, I'd be great if you get those to Marcia. We can make sure that those get on the list of work to be done come 2025. Anything else, Andrew?
Chair, if you don't mind, one of the
Go ahead.
compliance, one of the compliance regulations is to report on our financials for
Right.
the EDD. And I've had Marion Florence is here to just briefly tell us how it's going.
Excellent. Thank you.
Perfect.
So very briefly, this is all very standard throughout the years of operation here at WFRC. The WFEDD budget is a 3-year grant cycle. It was awarded most recently in April 1 of 2023. It's $420,000, which is split evenly between federal funding from the EDA and our WFRC local funds. So it's a 50-50 match on that. And right now we're at the halfway point through our grant cycle, and we've spent about half of the money. So we're right on track in terms of our spending. And we do regular financial reporting to the EDA and regular reimbursement requests. And so Marcia and I actually meet monthly with them. And one of the pieces of that meeting is for me to report on our finances and sort of keep them informed on our activities. The current expenses that we book to that grant are mainly staff time and professional activities. So it's all supporting that economic development district work. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's the basic gist.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions on either the finance or the bylaw review? Thanks again for what you do. Marcia, anything else you need to add?
No,
I
thank
don't see
you.
any questions coming in.
No, I thank you for letting me do that. It was a lot of reading. How was
No.
that?
Great information. We need to make sure we're in conformity with the bylaws. Obviously, the financing becomes very important. So with that, let's go ahead and move on. Our next agenda item would be public comment. This is the public comment. It's an opportunity to address the committee regarding any topic you'd like to discuss. To be considerate of everyone, though, at this meeting, we just ask that you limit your comments to 2 minutes per person. And if you'd please state your name for the record. Now's the time to do it. I understand we have one person. Is that right, Marcia?
We do. We have somebody here. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, sir. Please state your name.
Hello, my name is Oscar Arvizu, and I've been a Salt Lake City resident for over 25 years. In your June 13th meeting, an internal poll of your members asked what you dislike most about your city. It revealed the biggest issue was traffic, followed by things like rough roads and congestion. These problems will only worsen, as we all know, in Salt Lake City and the Wasatch Valley as we continue to grow. Most current solutions like fixing roads, expanding highways are temporary Band-Aids. The Rio Grande Plan offers a comprehensive solution that tackles these challenges head on. Yes, it comes with a heavy price tag, but when factored in with cost of traffic, growing pains, and the health impacts of congestion, it's clear this plan is worth the investment. Kicking the can down the road will only delay the inevitable and at a much greater cost. The Rio Grande Plan would spur economic development, especially around the track stations throughout the valley, increase ridership and reduce traffic across the valley. It could serve as a cornerstone for future expansion, better connecting east and west Salt Lake City with supporting critical projects like the Green Loop and the revitalization zone, and not to mention the Olympics. It would also reduce air pollution and move us closer to making Salt Lake City a truly walkable city. Every city transportation and legislative meeting I've attended points to the need for a central hub that connects all future plans and initiatives. That hub is the Rio Grande Plan. It's something the city, the valley, and our environmental needs to thrive and grow. And we need this as soon as possible. Please support the Rio Grande Plan, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for public comments?
There's no one
Seeing
else
none,
here.
let's,
Mr. Chair, I might just very briefly note, just in
Go
case
ahead.
anybody's wondering, some of you have probably heard about this before, but just for following that commenter's comment, the Rio Grande Plan is a citizen developed concept to bury the rail lines in downtown Salt Lake City, Union Pacific and UTA rail lines in Salt Lake City. And it's an exciting and ambitious idea, and also a complicated and expensive one. And I just want everybody to know that it is something that we at WFRC are looking at along with our transportation partners. And in fact, there's a broader analysis that's just kicking off called the Reconnecting Communities Analysis, looking at more broadly than just downtown, but in Salt Lake City about east-west mobility. And the Rio Grande Plan is an idea that will be evaluated also in context of that broader study.
Good. Great to know. Any questions for Andrew on that? All right. Thank you for that explanation. I had a little information, but not that much detail. So, Marcia, I'm assuming we still need to look at an agenda change because of timing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that would be good. Let's do that. I'm just looking at, we're moving through a lot faster than I thought. So yes, let's go ahead and make that.
Okay, so
Hold on a
without
minute.
objection, I'm going to move the
1 second.
agenda item
Commissioner?
4 to 5 and 5 to 4. So we'll just reverse those two items. We'll still deal with both agenda items, but just in reverse order. With that, let's go to our agenda item 5, Economic Development and Wasatch Choice Vision Centers. Meg Padgett is with us, Director of Community Economic Development from the Wasatch Front Regional. And I think, as we understand, a significant part of our comprehensive economic development strategy is to provide resources to support the development of city and town centers. We've talked about that a number of times. First step of being able to implement the Wasatch Choice Vision is to understand what city and town centers are. And Meg is here to fully explain just what that's about and what we may want to be informed about. So, Meg, you're there. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Commissioner,
Go ahead.
sorry, Megan. Hey, I think we missed the meeting minutes. If you could get an approval on those.
Okay, so let's
Sorry
hold
about
on that. I'm sorry about that. We did the welcome. So now that we have everybody online, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the minutes for the meeting held on June 13th, 2024. Thanks, Marcia, for reminding me of that.
No, I had like 3 people trying to yell at me over here, so I missed it too.
Okay. Okay, looking for a motion for those minutes for June 13th.
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes. This is Mayor Wynn.
Thanks, Mayor. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second Mayor Bush Kearns.
Thank you very much. I have a motion and a second. I'm going to place a motion. All those in favor of approving the minutes of that date, please say aye or signify. Any opposed?
Aye.
I'm going to rule the motion passes. Thank you very much. So let's now go to Megan for explanation of the town centers and explain the implementation for the Wasatch Choice Vision, what that means to us. Megan, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so we've talked a lot in these meetings about the Wasatch Choice Vision. We're amidst our Wasatch Choice workshops right now. That's our series of fall workshops all around the region where we talk about the Wasatch Choice vision with the purpose of updating it, keeping it updated. And we always talk about transportation within those workshops, but I want to talk a little bit more about the land use component of the vision. The Wasatch Choice vision overlays land use, economic development, and transportation. And I like to say that economic development is good land use and transportation planning. That in and of itself is a method of economic development. And so I'm going to dive into a little bit more about the vision and the land use side of it. Here are the 4 key strategies of the vision. So you've seen these before: transportation choices, housing options, parks and public spaces, and city and town centers. And really 3 of the 4 of these very much speak to land use. And so the vision is both our transportation and our land use look to 2050, and we're updating that to go further to past 2050 as well. Here's a look at what you see online when you open up the vision map. One of those tabs at the top is centers and land use. When you click on that tab, you can see that cities around the region have told us how they want to grow in the future at a high level, right? They're saying, here's our main centers of activity. I'll talk much more about what the centers really mean. They're also saying things like, you know, here are our future parks and public spaces. Here are our industrial districts or our educational centers, right? So we have this, it's sort of like a generalized future land use for the whole region. Here are the different types of land use involved there. So there's the centers, and those are going to be, you know, centers of activity, mix of uses. I'll go into all of those ingredients. There's also these employment districts, industrial districts, residential areas, and parks and public spaces. And all of those are really important to the function of our region. You know, this group, I certainly don't have to tell this group how important employment districts and industrial districts are, but they all play a role here. What I'm going to focus on most is these centers. So here's a kind of a sliding scale of the centers, and really they differ most by their size and their intensity. So neighborhood centers are less dense. They serve just the surrounding community. And then as you go up, city centers, urban centers, maybe those capture the whole city or even neighboring cities. And then metropolitan centers are our downtowns. Salt Lake City downtown, Ogden is emerging as a metropolitan center, as well as even Provo down in Utah County. A center is always 3 things. It can look different in every community, but it's always walkable. It's always a mix of uses, and it's always more intense than the surrounding area, right? So centers are relative. They can be, you know, dense metropolitan cores compared to the surrounding area that might have other housing choices, or they could be just, you know, 4 corners and create a really walkable center of a more rural community. So here's a few images to support that walkable. This is in Daybreak in South Jordan. You can see lots of pedestrian activity and programming in a walkable downtown. A mix of uses, right? That's usually going to be office or retail or maybe civic uses. And it's really always housing as well, because those rooftops support those other uses and the businesses located there. And then more intense in the surrounding. The example I have here is Sugar House, where you have really a city center where Sugar House is, or an urban center. And then surrounding that is different housing choices like single family homes and townhomes, right? So Sugar House is sort of dense with housing options. And then at the very center, it's more intense. Then there's lots of other things that make a center successful, right? You can't just add all that density and some sidewalks. There's a lot of life that goes into these centers. That's things like housing choices, different options for people to live there, destinations, a reason to be there, buildings that orient to the sidewalk and make you comfortable as a pedestrian. You're not parking and walking through a parking lot to access those buildings. The parking might be behind the building, or it might be shared. Maybe it's shared with businesses and office during the day and residential at night. There's trail connections, multimodal access to these centers. Maybe there's even transit serving these centers. Street trees, shade, greenery, things that make you feel comfortable as a pedestrian, programming and events, again, destinations or just other reasons to be there. When we talk about centers, we're not talking about strip malls or just more auto-oriented, you know, like along maybe some portions of State Street, right? There's lots to go to, but it's not walkable. And we're not talking about office parks that kind of have that single use. They're alive in the daytime and then not so much at night. We're talking about places that bring all of those things together. So those are important to our region, those different uses, but it's not quite what we mean when we say centers. What I want to talk about now is the 4 different types of center, right? We had neighborhood, city, urban, and metropolitan center, and I want to talk about the difference between those. Neighborhood is the least intense of these center types. Maybe 3 stories is the tallest building there, but it still provides a heart of maybe a smaller community. This is an example. So we've been producing these renderings to help visualize what these centers really are, but also help our cities communicate that with their constituents and just have a more visual conversation about what their community might look like in the future. This is a rendering we have of a neighboring center. You can see a community gathering space here, a park. We can see some nice sidewalk dining, right? Some life outside of these buildings, perhaps some civic uses, and you see some housing choices as well. Maybe some stacked flats or townhome options, different from the potentially single family neighborhoods that surround this center. And maybe the center is served by a bus, maybe it's not, but it's probably only drawing people from the surrounding neighborhoods. Another rendering, just some somewhat low density, but maybe very urban compared to the rest of the city life in a neighborhood center. And then you also see in a slightly more zoomed out view in these renderings, the context of these centers. The next center is the city center, maybe a 4-story building, maybe even 5 is the tallest building in this city center. Certainly a little bit more intense. You see the same theme of this community space, community gathering space. Maybe there's some opportunity to program some small events here. This center is served by an enhanced bus. So, you know, perhaps this draws a little bit more ridership for transit and you have some more robust bus. That's hard to say. Lots of pedestrian infrastructure all over the place. You can see it'd be very comfortable to walk or bike here, but there's also places to drive your car and park here. More renderings of the city center, lots of shade cover. And then we get to the urban center. So this is getting more intense. Maybe you do travel a few cities over to get to an urban center. There's a weekend event there or something you'd like to attend. You'll see, so 2 to 8 stories is a gauge we kind of use, but again, this is all really relative to what community it's in, its context. You see various housing choice here, maybe some office, this community gathering space really at the center of all of this, and even a festival street, right? A street with an option to close it off and just make these streets multi-purpose for both cars and pedestrians or even events. More visuals of the urban center. And then finally, it's the metropolitan center. Very dense, a really intense core. This might be something that reminds you of an Ogden or Salt Lake downtown, right? And you see a more robust ability to have events here, this amphitheater use, perhaps rail transit. Most likely you're going to have rail transit serving a metropolitan center in some capacity, various uses here, and you see lots more intensity, right? Maybe there's no height limit in some of the areas of a metropolitan center. And then you can still see, you know, the context of this place. The whole city's not a metro center, right? There's other housing options kind of in the distance. Another component of what we've been working on is a little easier to view on your screen. Maybe it's good we're virtual today, but it's just zooming out a bird's eye view of an existing condition and then how that place might grow and change into a center. There's lots of different examples of this. This existing condition is really aging retail, but you do have some existing natural features and things like that. And then you can see how over time this place might become more of a center. Lots of communities in our region are looking at infill opportunities rather than greenfield, right? So we've created lots of different contexts for you to play around with. And maybe these are just helpful in convening a conversation in your community about what you might become. These are going to be all available to you on our Wasatch Choice website. So why do we talk about centers, right? They're hard to make happen. It takes public and private partnership. It's not quite as easy as the status quo land use implementation, but there's lots of benefits to centers, things like biking and walking and transit use increasing, housing choices, right? We know we have a housing availability and affordability problem, and centers can be a really big part of that puzzle. Property and sales tax per acre increase. This could be a revenue generator for other areas in your communities. street and utility costs per unit decrease. That's, it's an economy of scale, right? You have units taking up less linear space, and so you have less road, less utilities serving them. Indoor and outdoor water use also decreases in centers. A lot of that is landscaping. And then there's kind of these qualitative benefits, residents feeling a sense of place, right? They're really proud of the core of their community. It's where they like to spend their evenings and weekends, or maybe they even get to work there and they just feel really lucky to be able to spend that time in their city. They also absorb growth efficiently. We have lots of growth pressure throughout our region, and focusing some of that growth in centers can alleviate pressure elsewhere in the city, preserving open space and farmland and things like that. This graph is a little hairy, but I want to share it with this committee because I think it's something you might find interesting. With these renderings we've produced, we've actually taken exactly what's in those renderings and plugged them into a pro forma to see what kind of sales and property tax revenue is generated. So there's different versions of a neighborhood center, a city center, an urban center, and a metro center. And we have this great data we'll have available to you about what they kind of generate in terms of sales and property tax compared to maybe some more suburban options surrounding. Okay, I'm gonna maybe turn it back to the chair and see if there's questions now.
Meg, can I?
Oh, sure.
Could you just go back for 1 second to the previous slide? Mr. Chair, can I offer a brief comment here?
Please do.
I'm going to say 2 things. The first thing is that we're providing this information about centers, and I want to emphasize something that Meg said. Not every area makes sense to have more intensive development, of course. Those of you that are local elected officials, you think about the needs across your community and what are the areas that do and do not make sense for having a mix of uses and multifamily housing and centered development, and which are the areas you want to keep as lower density development, more single family residential. And striking that balance is really important as you're working in your community and working with your constituents. And the information that Meg is presenting here, particularly on economic development, is relevant for purposes of the EDD. And so those of you that work in the private sector and that are developers, that with more intensive activity, more enhanced development, you're generating more revenue per acre off of that property. And so if you're in the public sector and you're thinking about what your overall tax burden is to pay for city services or county services, the revenue that you're generating per acre, and then the costs that you incur to provide services per unit are really important measures as you're thinking about the overall financial strategy for your community. And by one of the points that Meg is making here, of course, is that if you identify the areas that are appropriate for greater intensity for centers, and you can absorb some of your growth in those areas with different housing types, then you have the ability to generate more revenue, reduce per unit cost for services, and potentially thereby help balance out your tax burden, your tax rates that you have to impose as you're looking to provide services for your community. Now, I know that's sort of a 101 for a lot of you, but as we all think about how are we going to grow and absorb growth that's coming in a way that provides amenities for our communities and also balances the economics and the tax burden, we wanted to highlight this relationship between the development patterns and the economic impacts and tax policy.
Excellent point, Andrew. Meg, did you have anything else you needed to add?
Just that we're always here to help. This is our Transportation and Land Use Connection program logo. I just want to remind that if you're interested in exploring some of these concepts at a deeper level in your city, we'll have all these resources available to you, but we also have the ability to do a project one-on-one with your city and dive into this stuff. Thanks.
That's great. I'm sure we can all take advantage of that. Certainly. Any questions for Meg from anybody on the committee, anybody online? Now's your opportunity.
Commissioner, if I could just really quickly also say that.
Go ahead.
This is one of the key strategies in our SEDS. And so I just want to make sure people understand that we really are trying to link that economic development piece with transportation and promoting city and town centers. So this is one of the, and you said it earlier, but it's one of the best ways to do that is to educate people on what centers are and how we can move forward. So thank you. And the other thing
Yeah.
is that I see Nate and John both on, so we can go to our next item whenever you're ready.
I just wonder if we wouldn't, just if you don't mind, real quick, I see Mayor Nguyen, Mayor Bush, Mayor Lang, Mayor Mon. I might be missing some of our local elected officials, but I wonder if any of them would be bold enough to offer a comment about this approach of centers development and how that's going in your communities.
Any of the mayors? I saw Mayor Berube on there as well.
Mm-hmm. Mayor Bush, if you're talking, you're muted. We welcome your comment, but you're muted.
Oh, there we go. So I'm sorry, this is the Kearns Mayor Kelly Bush. So right now we are working on the city center. We've been working on this for years. Actually, we started with Megan years ago, but we are obviously really amping this up, being a venue city with the Olympics and everything. You know, just I want to say right around the corner. It's actually 10 years away, but everybody right now, it just feels like it's right around the corner. And with that, you know, it's with housing and everything else, and with us not having a lot of area to develop, what we're finding is that we're really going to have to build up, right? And we can't really build out, so we're building up, and we're really having to look at really creative ways to use our spaces. And so there's been a lot of outreach with just different agencies, really looking at really reaching out and asking for that assistance, technical help and things like that to really make this work downtown right now.
Thanks, Mayor. 10 years in long-range planning is around the corner.
It is.
Doing the work you should be.
And it was really funny because when we just pulled, we've been looking at that plan when, you and I first met 8 years ago.
Feels like 10
So,
years.
and it's been revived and looked at over and over again, but it's amazing. It's, we've looked at it and it is, I mean, it's just, with the housing, changes and things like that. And it's just really being creative and having to look at something that even over 10 years that you can just really continue to change, because that's what it is, right? The legislature just continues to change, and we're going to have to keep it fresh and have something that you can continue to adapt and adjust.
Mayor, I just would love to acknowledge, we show these beautiful renderings and here are the easy things your city can just go ahead and implement. I want to acknowledge that we're not sugarcoating anything. This is really challenging. And that's why, we do have these technical assistance programs. And I want to plug to you, Mayor, that, we've done the plan. We can continue on that and look at ordinances, look at language for RFPs, for development partnerships and things like that. So just we can keep pulling at that thread. I don't want to imply that this is easy.
Don't you worry, because we look to you guys. You've been amazing for us. You've been incredible partners. And so we want to thank you. We've been incredibly blessed to have you guys in our corner. So thank you so much for everything. So thank you.
And Mayor Berube, you're working on your North Ogden downtown as well.
We are trying. It is a long process. I really appreciate your comments. When you look at this, I've always talked about soft infrastructure. It's easy to identify the hard infrastructure, but when we start looking at density and the need to police our entire city and take care of that, it is an analysis, it is a process, but we appreciate you being there for our support.
We always love to be able to help, and it's also it can be a challenge because producing these centers can be a change for the community, and you don't always have unanimity of a view on these things. Mayor Nguyen, you've been through some of these issues over time with having to work with, or you're getting to work with your residents and taking feedback, and it's not easy to sort through all of that, is it?
No, none of this is easy for any of us. You've got half of your population that supports the things that you're trying to do, and the other half says, stop. We don't want it. But we're gonna keep moving forward. That's what we do.
And Mayor, when we've assessed that as a third like it, a third don't like it, and a third don't care.
That's very probably true.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And out of those thirds, a half don't engage until something starts being built, and then they say, why did, I'm sorry, I'm sounding a tad cynical right now. People are busy. People are busy in their lives, right? And you know, you send notices and they don't have time to go to a community meeting, but then they see something start to happen and they tune in. I understand. These are the challenges. Mayor Mon, you want to comment?
Yeah, so we're in an interesting position out here in Syracuse where we've got some developments, city center type developments going up, but we also see the need for future neighborhood centers that will be a part of other development that happens. The challenge that we have is we have sometimes landowners who disagree with your master plan and say, well, I could make a lot of money if you'll let me build housing, but if you realize that you've got an area that you can't serve if you let all of the land go to housing with and miss out on the city center, that's it becomes a little bit of a fight. And the reason that I bring this up is then you've got developers that go to the legislature and say cities won't let me build. We have a housing crisis, but they won't let me build. Well, I don't think that that's true at all, because we are, in my case, we're the fastest growing city in Davis County, 7 of the last 8 years. So it's not that we're not allowing it. The question really comes down to, how do you preserve this without a particular landowner saying, well, I could get money today. I don't want to wait till tomorrow, when that city center really will be needed, or a neighborhood center really will be needed. We've got studies that back things up. We've recognized that, there are great distances between particular services like grocery and retail, and you say, okay, well, where's the logical place? Well, the convergence of your major traffic, of course, and yet those people say, well, if I could sell today, I could build apartments, and say, well, that might come with, but we have to preserve. So anyway, I'm just throwing that out there because it's a dance that we do with everybody's desires, and everybody wants something today, but they forget about what we have to protect for tomorrow. Otherwise, all we are is a bunch of housing, and we miss the opportunity. We don't want people to have to commute long distances for services.
Great point.
So I just want to add one thing. You don't always need open land. In West Valley City, we had our downtown area that had a lot more commercial that was kind of dying out. So we took the initiative over 24 years ago to start a project to acquire land, put in a park, high density, other businesses that would support. We were next to already our city hall and the mall across the street. So we took and redeveloped to kind of make one of these hubs. We have tracks go right to the area. We have a major bus hub. So it's really worked even on existing to do as a redevelopment. But it does take time.
Chair Frohr, thanks so much for, allowing us to have a little discussion about this and hearing from folks who are doing greenfield development and infill and redevelopment. And, Mayor Mon, your point about balancing the very appropriate respect for private property owners to develop in the way they want, then also balancing that with your role as local elected officials of thinking about the overall health of the community and long-term vision for the community. And that is sometimes a tricky balance. And as you all have said, you don't always have unanimous view from your residents either about how to do it. But this is the hard work you all are at, and we're, as Meg was just saying, we're happy to help you in any way we can with technical assistance, planning assistance, and materials any way that we can.
Thanks. And let me just add from, I appreciate all the mayors and this, obviously is a major city issue coming before, but it also applies to the county. Andrew, you were on a meeting with us yesterday for Weber County. We're looking at what we can do with infrastructure, including roads, transportation, et cetera, and housing. We're currently looking at a proposal that takes about a 600-acre, probably creates a small city. 600-acre development puts homes with a blend of commercial, mixed housing, office, and then the idea of locate that close to where they may live and work. So we have kind of that surrounded by right now zoned for commercial, possibly manufacturing, so that we can maybe take some of that traffic off the roads. There's a development that if you haven't seen it, jump online. It's called Norton's Commons out in Kentucky. I actually had the opportunity to visit that. This proposed development really is a model after Norton. So people can live there, they can walk, they have small community centers within that area with a mix of open space, parks, recreation opportunities, church, schools, everything that drives to what I call a great community. So we're excited as this progresses. There hasn't been anything set in concrete, but we're looking at actually revising some of our general plan that if this goes into fruition, we may change some of the development we see in smaller parcels and really drive them toward what I'm going to call this community center, taking the pressure off of infrastructure, transportation, and then giving a mix of housing that I think we all need. So
it's remarkable what you're planning out there in Western Weber County, unincorporated Western Weber County, and trying to avoid the situation where there's just housing development where then everybody, if they want to get to services or get to work or whatever, they have to drive a long distance. So planning holistically, what you've got envisioned there is really significant.
Well, thanks. I think we're excited to see it unfold here over the next number of years. So, all right. Anything else? Marcia, should we move on? We ready?
Certainly, if you're ready.
Let's do that. Let's move on to the agenda item 4 as we reverse though, which is the economics of the Olympics. We have with us Nate Lloyd, Director of Economic Research, and John Dowman, Senior Research Fellow for Kem C. Gardner Policy Institute. Everybody understands in 2034, we've got a major event called the Winter Olympics coming our way. We want to welcome all those people that have been here before and obviously a lot more to the world we have here in Utah. We know that the Olympics and Paralympics are going to bring a great deal of excitement to our state and possibly some money. But how does that impact the economics of our state? We need to understand that, I think, a little more, really what the impacts are. And to join us today are Nate Lloyd, as I mentioned, and also John Dowman. They're going to take some time and go over actually what they see from their point of view. So, Nate, do you want to lead?
Yes.
Time's yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Marcia, for the invitation to be here. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Thumbs
You're
up.
coming in strong. Yep.
Awesome. Let me share my screen and let me know once you can see that. I just have some slides that will help with the conversation.
Great.
Okay.
You're up and going.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone, and thanks for the flexibility with the schedule. We're happy to be here and to have this opportunity to be with you all and go over some research we've done earlier this year with a couple of studies. We'll go through those and we welcome questions. This can be a conversation throughout the slides or kind of at the end, whatever works easiest. So to start, as I mentioned, we released some reports earlier this year. Actually, the first that's listed on this slide was released back in 2018, but we looked back at the 2002 Olympics using the data that was available, using a study that GOPB did as well. And we estimated what the economic and fiscal impacts were of the 2002 Olympics. So we'll review those briefly. This year, we did a study of the upcoming 2034 games to see how that compares to the 2002 games. We also did a study on the Olympic Legacy Foundation, which many of you know is the organization responsible for preserving the venues and keeping them in the good shape that they are. So looking at the 2002 Olympics, we identified $4.3 billion in spending that took place. And this is over half of that is the Salt Lake Organizing Committee expenditures. So the organizing committee for the games. There's also a large portion of that which is visitor spending. So the people that came to Utah, to the state, that were out of state and spent their money while they were here enjoying the Olympics and the Paralympics. That was about 630 million. And then there was federal spending. If y'all remember, this was right after 9/11, and security was a huge concern. And so federal security spending was estimated around 300 million. So that's, again, out of state money coming in, being spent here on security. That adds to the economy. So that's part of what we'd count in our impact study. There were some other organizing committee infrastructure investments. But once we get to that 4.3 billion number, then we need to take out out of state spending, stuff that leaks out of the economy. And so we were able to identify kind of in-state versus out of state vendors. We were able to take out and account for the displacement of skiers and snowboarders, because it's so crowded. Many don't come during the Olympics, and so there's a little dip in in the skier days and the visitors and their associated spending. So we account for that took place during February of 2002, and then we also make sure we're not counting kind of in-state revenue. So what's coming in on an impact study, we're trying to just isolate the out-of-state money coming to benefit our economy, and then what's staying here, what's getting spent here. And so that was net new 3.1 billion in direct spending. And this is all in 2023 dollars now. So that spending has multiplier effects, and we use input-output modeling software to understand the impact that the $3.1 billion had. The model is doing a lot for us. It's accounting for the economic effects, the geography of where we live and our state with surrounding states. It's accounting for dynamic effects. So it's not just static. There's some synergy happening with different effects going on. So it's able to account for all that. And we're able to estimate that output, there was $7.5 billion in economic output resulting from the games. So that's higher than a 2.0 multiplier. The job years is above 45,000. We sometimes face criticism for what we do here. We never state that these are permanent effects. A lot of this was largely temporary, and that's why we report these in job years, right? So if you divide it by 10 years, you're around 4,500 new jobs that existed for 10 years. But we don't try to pretend that all this is permanent. A lot of the impacts are largely temporary, and that's true with any large event like this. And it's true of the 2034 estimates that we have as well. So I'll go ahead and keep going so that we can compare. But keep in mind the success that we saw. Sorry, I'll pause there. Any questions before I kind of keep going? Andrew.
Nate, I've got one question for you. Could you just go back one slide for a moment? You were talking about the direct spending, and you mentioned federal spending. And particularly, you noted the revenue that came in for security purposes after 9/11. And
yes,
one of the things that gets talked about, and we talk about a lot, is the expectation that some have that there'll be a lot of federal infrastructure money for transportation and other things. My understanding, so I'll share my understanding and then ask you if you can confirm or deny. My understanding is that in 2002, while we did a significant amount of infrastructure investment in the lead up to the Olympics, there was not specific new Olympic transportation dollars that came in to us. That's not really the way it worked. And the reason that I bring that up is because in our work, and we work with UDOT and UTA all the time, we hear often an expectation from people, very understandably, that there will be a sort of a spigot of federal money turned on for infrastructure that will flow to us from the Olympics. And that is not what we are expecting. And Nate, that is not what we understand happened in 2002 as well. It can help us to be, the Olympics can help us to be competitive, enhance our competitiveness. It's yet another reason to do projects in infrastructure that we were already planning to do to serve and benefit our community generally. But we should not be expecting that there will be, again, some spigot of federal money that gets turned on and flows to us in the billions of dollars for infrastructure because we're going to be hosting the Olympics. What's your sense on that?
That's my understanding as well, that most of that investment was state money, local government money, and it was maybe sped up, right? Because there was a motivating force in 2002, like there hopefully will be this time as well. So there was a motivator to maybe speed some things up or have more concrete deadlines on some of these projects. But yeah, my understanding is that there wasn't a large amount for permanent infrastructure. John, do you know differently than that? I'll just double check with my colleague John and just make sure we're on the same.
No. Yeah, and I know as far as what we modeled, the only federal monies were for security. We didn't model any transportation funding along those lines.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully people don't take that as disappointing news. We just want to be realistic and be planning realistically for the path forward. Let's do all the things as much as we can, but have that realistic picture of what's going to happen. Thank you, Nate. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to get that in there. Thank you.
Please do. If there's any other thoughts, just jump out, anybody, please. It was a very successful games. The quote of the president of NBC Sports, highlights that. But there was a surplus, part of which 76 million of which was used as seed money, if you will, to kickstart the Olympic Legacy Foundation and to maintain the 3 primary venues. And so that created a legacy that is still being used today by professional athletes, by Olympic athletes, by amateur athletes, and the general public. All these venues that have been able to maintain and be used over the years. This is the map of the 3 that I think everyone's aware of. The Olympic Oval in Kearns, the Olympic Park in Park City, and then Soldier Hollow in Heber. And those are the 3 primary venues from 2002 that have been preserved and maintained over time by the Olympic Legacy Foundation. Now, the endowment hasn't, we'll show this later, but the endowment hasn't covered all of those expenses. They've required capital expenditures to be maintained over time. A lot of that has come from state appropriations, so there has been public investment in these over time, but they have certainly helped the case for the bid committee and really helped secure the bid for the 2034 games. They were critical in that process. I won't spend too much time on this because this was a different study, but again, if you're interested in it, we released this in July as well. Just looking at the annual economic contributions of the Legacy Foundation, and they are significant. Out of the 58 billion in spending that takes place every year, about 58 million every year that's taking place associated with the Legacy Foundation. 12 million of that is the visitors to their venues, and so they're contributing to Utah's economy, even without an Olympic Games, right? Just every year there's at least 90,000, probably 100,000, because we had a conservative estimate on one of our data sources, but they're getting visitors every year from out of state coming to use the venues, and they're spending money at them. So there's an ongoing economic contribution happening because of the Legacy Foundation and the good work they're doing to preserve the venues. And this brings us to the other study that we published in July of this year. John was the primary author on this, so I'll turn it to you now, John, to talk about this.
Right, thanks, Nate. So yeah, 2034 Olympics, which we now know are going to happen. I also actually worked on a couple of years ago an analysis of a potential 2030 Winter Olympics before we knew what we were going to get and if we were going to get it. But so basically, we use the same methodology. We work closely with the organizing committee, the Salt Lake Committee. They gave us their budget, and just on that, this is based on their budget is sort of a constantly evolving document, and so this our analysis was based on the latest version at the time. I'm sure it's been tweaked since then, but we begin with 4.1 billion in total direct spending. 3.1 billion of that is by the committee. We've got about 760 million in out-of-state visitor spending, and then some federal security spending, which was based on the amount actually spent for the 2002 games, and they just inflate it to current dollars. Do the same adjustments for some of that spending by the committee goes to out-of-state vendors. We lose some of our regular winter sports visitors because of the Olympics and their spending associated with them. And then we also adjust for the portion of the committee's budget that is funded by out-of-state sources, which I believe was about 75%. So again, we want to capture the new money that's coming into the state and where it's going. So that gets us down to that 2.6 billion. And so that compares to, let's see, what did we have? It was
3.1.
3.1, sorry, for the 2002 games. And you get the ensuing impacts. Here we got 3.9 billion in GDP, 42,000 job years this time, as opposed to 45,000, 46,000 for 2002, and 6.6 billion in output. Again, these are cumulative, and in this case, it's over an 11-year period from now, 2024, through 2034, whereas the 2002 impacts were accumulated over a 7-year period. We also had personal income impacts that aren't shown here, but we did report them, I think, in both reports. 2.5 billion for the 2034 games and 3.7 billion for the 2002 games. And next slide, please. So part of the reason that the expenditure was lower, or is expected to be lower, is, as Nate was saying, with the foundation, we've maintained a lot, if not all, of our venues, our facilities. So there won't be that needed capital investment to build them next time around. So you can see here for the 2002 games, so 286.7 million investment in the venues. This time they're expecting just 31.2 million. And again, that's due to not only the Olympic Foundation, but the state investing as well to maintain those facilities. Yeah, okay, next slide, please. This is just sort of pointing out the annual impacts between now, 2034, and 2035, the year after. Not surprisingly, most of them occur in the year of the Olympics. But it also sort of emphasizes that these are, as Nate was saying, temporary. This is an event, not an ongoing enterprise or something like that. So just to emphasize that these are temporary impacts, although it is over a nice long 10-year period that we'll be experiencing them. As well as the economic impacts, we also estimated the fiscal impacts, and these are just from the economic impacts. They don't include any expenditures by the state sort of specifically for the Olympics. We have a fiscal model that we've developed at the Gardner Institute that uses outputs from the economic model from REMI, and takes the employment, personal income, industry output, and REMI also has a demographic component, so it generates demographic population impacts as well. And we plug that into our fiscal model. The employment generates revenues or property tax revenues. We've linked it to property taxes. With the personal income generates sales and income tax revenue, and the output, industry output, generates corporate income tax revenues. And then on the other side, the additional population attracted by the economic activity generates additional costs for the state and local government through higher education, public education, and then non-education expenditures. So again, these are tied only to those economic impacts of the spending in the lead up and operation of the Olympics, and it doesn't include any expected state appropriations for the Olympics for, say, transportation, infrastructure, or things like that. But we see at the state level, there's a net revenue of 21 million. At local, net revenues expected of 29 million. Again, this is accumulated over the 11 year period, and all in constant 2023 dollars.
Well, thank you, John. We're to our last slide. Any questions for John on any of those last slides before we wrap up with this one?
Any hands up, Andrea? I don't see any on this side.
Okay. As John mentioned, the report is isolating the effect of the spending by the committee for the games and the organizing committee, and the out-of-state money that they coordinate with security and whatnot. So there has been state appropriations from the legislature in the last 6 years, as you can see on this table, almost 100 million. These are in millions, and so 15, 16 million a year on average. But that has helped the venues be maintained. It helped secure the bid, and it's why that CapEx is expected to be so much lower for the committee on this next games. And that's why the impacts, to be frank, are a little bit less than in 2002. We've got existing venues, so less construction, less impacts in certain sectors that we had in 2002. Yeah, that's about it. If there's any questions, we're happy to take those.
Great presentation. Nate, appreciate it. John, any questions for either John or Nate? Andrew, Marcia, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Sure, I just want to add, we are so lucky that we have Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute here in our state to be able to do this kind of, these kind of analysis and research, and to keep us abreast on what's happening. And I really appreciate your time. And I think going back to one of the things that we talked about right before this is creating places where people want to be. And I think that also adds to, as we start to grow and people are coming in and enjoying our venues, and that they want to stay and they want to be here because we are creating centers and we're creating a place where people want to be, and we're creating access to opportunities. And so it just goes along with all the work that the mayors and the elected officials and developers and team are all doing. So I just want to thank Nate and John for taking some time.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks so much for having us. Honestly, it's a pleasure to be with this group and have this opportunity. We're here for public service, and we really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, great job. And I'm glad you pointed out that one of the things that made the 2034 possible was the continued investment by the state legislature into the legacy and maintaining our existing venues, making sure they're up to date and attract those out-of-state visitors. It's going to save us a lot of money in the future. Obviously, the CapEx, because of that, is a little less than it was in 2022 or 2002, but it makes sense. And it makes sense to maintain those venues and attract those, so we don't have to put as much in for the 2034. So appreciate that. Anything else?
Commissioner Frohr,
Andrew?
I'll just note, because I know you won't, that the decision that the state made to continue investing in those venues. Commissioner Frohr, before he was Weber County Commissioner, he was Representative Frohr and was one of the chairs of the appropriations committees, and was one of the folks that had to go through that process of making that wise investment. So thank you, Commissioner, former legislator Frohr.
Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. It's been so long, I forgot.
And I'll also just note, in case anybody wants to take a look, I brought up earlier transportation investments, and even though we're not necessarily anticipating to get a significant additional add of federal transportation dollars, we are anticipating significant investment, not just anticipating, the funds are there for most of it, in transportation projects between now and 2034. I just dropped a link in the chat of a map that we've created in collaboration with our partners. And I guess while I'm talking about it, I might as well show it. With our partners at UDOT and UTA, the map is of the Olympics venues, and then also the transportation system that we anticipate will be in place in 2034. So that's the system in place today, plus things that will be constructed between now and then. And I'll just note, this is kind of cool what you can do. I'll turn off all these layers. And so what you can see now, Olympic venues anticipated, of course, up at Snow Basin and down in Provo as well. And prior to 2002, prior to the Winter Olympics in 2002, there were some significant transportation projects that were done that were accelerated. And here you can see what they are. I mean, those of you that were here at the time remember what a huge lift it was to rebuild I-15 and to do the first runs of the tracks in the Salt Lake Valley and do interchange work out over in Summit County. So that was a big lift. But relative to that, look at what has happened since the 2002 Olympics. I'll add this layer: huge investment in our infrastructure, both in roadway and in transit. Again, pre-2002 major projects, and since then, so much investment that's been happening in transit and in roadway. And then again, just by way of comparison, if you click this button, it shows you key projects that we anticipate between now and 2034. So the strategic double tracking of Front Runner, the rebuilding of or enhancement to the Mountain View corridor, bus rapid transit, enhancements to light rail downtown, and from the airport, bus rapid transit in Park City and interchanges. And you go up north and you see critical interchange improvements to serve off of I-84, and then also enhancements down in Utah County. You get the point that there's so much that is happening. Most, but not all of these projects are funded. Even with all the investment that we have going into infrastructure, there are still some of these projects that are not fully funded. That's something that we're working on. I said this before, these are projects that are important to mobility and quality of life and economy in our communities, regardless of the Olympics. And they were planned regardless of the Olympics, but they will also help us serve the world even better in 2034. So feel free to poke around in those maps at your leisure and let us know if you have any questions.
Great. Appreciate you bringing that out, Andrew.
Commissioner Frower, this is Carrie Fullerton. How are you?
Hi, Carrie.
Hi. Hey, does the analysis have any revenue leading up to the Olympics? So people that want to see the venues just the year prior or a couple years prior, is there any meaningful monetary benefit there?
As far as like visitor spending by folks?
Yeah, like visitors and, companies are coming to check out the venues and see what they're gonna do, or, any of that precursor spending that benefits the economy, but just not the year of, the month of the actual events.
Right. There is not. Our visitor spending estimates were based on the ticket sales from the committee's budget and some, spending profiles and, estimates of what portion of those would be to out-of-state visitors and such. So it only includes visitors to the games themselves and not construction tourism.
Thank you.
And if I may add to exemplify Carrie's point, is the test events that we will have to hold at each of these venues leading up to 2034 that will also bring in significant visitor spending and investment in the facilities to accommodate those test events.
Yeah, great point, Sarah. Thank you.
There's two things to add to that. I think some of the revenue estimates from the committee, though, hits before 2034 in the form of media deals that they have. Some of that might start sooner than 2034. But also that Legacy Foundation report we did identifies at least 90,000 out-of-state visitors. Those are athletes, spectators, general public, that are every year, including the year of our analysis 2023, that are visiting the three primary venues and spending about $12 million a year at them. So that gets a little bit at that. Of course, that would be an underestimate for some of the years leading up to 2034, but at least that has been done kind of separately as well.
Thank you.
Good to know. Anyone else? Marcia, any hands raised? Anyone else online that would like to make a comment or question?
I don't see any other hands raised, but what I will say is that what we will do is make sure that we send out reports, links that we've included in the chat, and even the Norton Commons link, so people can see, all the things that we've been talking about, Wasatch Choice Vision map that Andrew shared. So it will come in a form of, as we do the minutes. So look for that as well. So that that'd
be great. Appreciate sending those out. Yeah. Okay. Seeing no other comments or questions or hand raised, just a reminder, the next meeting will be Thursday, December 12th, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. We're anticipating that will probably be in-person meeting unless the weather, other things come up, but stay posted. Marcia will keep us posted on that. With no other business, I would be happy to entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Have a motion, huh? You have a second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. We're adjourned. Thank you. See you in December.
Thanks,
Appreciate your
everyone.
attendance. Thank you. Thanks, Marcia, Andrew, Meg.
Thank you. Thanks, Commissioner and everybody.